We have a special guest with us this morning. As I've mentioned, it is Mental Health Sunday, and we are grateful for our connection with Mental Health Connect and also to our care team who regularly asks us to pause and think about our mental health. So if you would give a warm Shepherd of the Hills welcome this morning to Kirstin Rewey, who is here as our guest speaker this morning. Kirsten, you may take it away.
Great, thank you. I hope everyone can hear me okay. I'm going to turn up my volume. If there's a way to wave and say, you can't hear me, let me know. Thanks for having me. It is such an honor to be here and have the opportunity to talk a little bit more about mental health at this time. Pastor Scott tells me that you are a well-resourced community. And I think that means you're also people who know there's always room for improvement, that we're all a work in progress. You know, as a therapist, I often feel like I am a lone soldier working one person at a time, 1 hour at a time, chipping away on these issues. And it's a tough thing because, you know, you don't always have an opportunity to share this growth that you see. You don't have an opportunity to spread the wisdom of what is going on in that room to a larger audience. So this is such an honor today to have the opportunity to talk to you all and share some of the beautiful things that I get to witness every day in my office. One of the things that I wanted to start with is a cartoon that I love, which is, it's a cartoon of a therapy space, and in it is a couch, a classic couch, and there's the therapist sitting in the corner, and the therapist has their glasses on, and in the couch is lying a nut, a Fisher peanut, and the Fisher peanut says to the therapist, "Doc, you know, sometimes I feel like a nut and sometimes I don't." And what I love about this cartoon is I think it's really tells the story of all of us. Sometimes we just feel kind of nuts, and sometimes we feel good. Sometimes we feel like we are doing what we need to be doing. And I think in this time of the pandemic, you know, we are all a little bit lost in the sense of knowing exactly the right way to take care of ourselves. So I'm really thrilled to be here today to share some of the things that I've been hearing in my office. One of the things people ask me all the time is, isn't it hard listening to people's problems all day long? I mean, you must be facing your own stress right now. We're all in this together. But isn't it hard hearing terrible, you know, sadness each day? And the truth is, I don't feel like I'm hearing sadness all the time. I'm hearing people's sense of hope. I'm hearing their challenges, but I'm also hearing many joys. I'm hearing the good stuff as well. I'm also feeling like in everyone's story, I hear a little bit of what I'm experiencing too. And it just makes me realize the power of telling our stories. When I hear other people's embarrassing moments or worries about their life, I instantly feel a shift in myself. I feel like, wow, you know, this is a very human experience. We're all in this together. So I have this really strong belief that we should not hold our stories private. Our stories don't just belong to us. They're part of our collective human experience. So when our worries are there and our fears are there, sometimes we don't want to share them because we're ashamed of them. But by telling them and unburdening ourselves, we can hear the narratives that we all commonly share. One of the things also about being a therapist during this time is that none of us as therapists were trained in how to support others when we too were experiencing the same thing. So I have, for the first time in my practice, been much more open about my own life. And I've noticed an enormous shift in my practice of just connection, this feeling of they know me on a more personal level. And it has been, I think, really helpful for all of us. So I'm so happy to be here today to talk a little bit about some of the main things that I've been doing with people that are working, that I'm hearing from them, these are tools that we kind of go to over and over and over again, and they've been very effective. I'm not a researcher, so I can't tell you that, these are tried and true through all this research, but I am someone who reads a lot of research. I'm also what I call a cherry picker. I love to choose my favorite tools from my favorite mentors and people out in the field that I admire greatly. So this is just kind of an overview of some of my favorite and most effective tools. I also want to say that I'm not really speaking to chronic and persistent mental health issues today, or addiction or traumas. I'm speaking more to the majority of us. What most of us are dealing with is this vacillation between sometimes we wonder if we're doing okay, and sometimes we feel like we got this thing and we're going to get through it. So I wanted to, for the purposes of today, talk about how, a lot of us are, I think, we know the things that we should do. Things like exercise, get into nature, call a friend, eat well, focus on the positives, find some quiet time. And those things are all super effective. The problem with this year is that we're all getting a little burned out. We're losing steam. And, this is a really normal thing to feel. This sense of, oh my goodness, another day that I'm supposed to go down my little list and do my things. It just feels like, when is the end? The end doesn't feel like it's tangible. And that feeling of burnout is part of this process. So I just wanted to share some of the things that are coming up, and I'm going to put them into three kind of categories that I have been clustering sort of work that I've been doing with people. I'm going to put them into the category of mind. And the second one is compassion for self. And the third category is compassion for others. So I'm going to break these each down a little bit and share some examples that I hope will be helpful for you. I'm not actually able to see. Let me see if I can do this differently. Dave, Dave, I'm seeing Dave's face in the screen. Is there a way for me to see my face, or no? It's easier sometimes for me to see that. No? Okay, well, I'm just not going to worry about that piece then. So the first area is mind. So when we are thinking about, ourselves, we think about the power of our mind. Many of us have what I call kind of this super highway of worries. We get very stuck in our worrying head, the head that tells us we can't do something, we're not good at it, maybe we said the wrong thing, we're worried about what's to come, we're worried if we made the right decisions. That super highway of worry starts to take hold, and it becomes almost impossible, we feel, to get out of it. So one of the things we work a lot on in my office is talking about the fact that you can actually choose a new thought. You can say to yourself, I'm just going to position myself for a new thought. So we actually do this exercise where we talk about the things that they ruminate upon, and we then think of a stop sign. So you almost close your eyes and envision a stop sign, and you're telling that thought, stop, you're not welcome here. And then we try to think of some replacement thoughts that would be more useful to us. So things like, just some self-doubts that come up, that we stay in that space, but we have the power to talk back to the thoughts. And what I find is that people will think, oh, that just seems way too simplified. But when they really actively try it, we notice that we do have inertia to choose another thought. As human beings, our kind of preset is to sort of go to a negative space. We just sort of feel that pull. So we have to actually pull that inertia to the direction of positive. And I even see, with the power of the mind, that we need to sometimes also tell ourselves it's okay not to be great at everything. we can allow ourselves to do something badly. So if you're talking yourself out of trying a new thing or doing something that makes you afraid, give yourself permission to just do it okay. Give yourself permission to be a human in this thing called life, and to need practice. So sometimes we just have to get out and do things. Research continues to show us that people who have just that general attitude of just do it, let it be what it is, fare a lot better in times of stress, particularly chronic stress. So this idea in the mind of choosing another thought and allowing yourself the opportunity to replace a thought that isn't working for you with a thought that might serve you better. And then also telling yourself it's okay to just get out and do it, whatever it is that you're having a block with, and allow yourself not to be so good at something. This gives us a sense of agency in our life. When we have action, we do things, we get out and do, not think, we do, we feel empowered. So when we find ourselves stuck in our head, we need to take that shift and go back into more of a sense of agency. In the area of compassion for self, oh, actually, in the area of mind, I wanted to tell a quick example. And what this, I actually, in the past few weeks, it's interesting, I've had a lot of parents ask me about having hard conversations with their kids. And maybe they're young adult kids, they're teenage kids. And I think that they worry so much about doing the conversation wrong, particularly with teenagers and young adults. So even, hot topics, things like sex and what they're being exposed to on their iPads or their, computer screens, they're worried about talking about these hard issues. And this is an example of it's okay to do it not so great. It's okay to enter into these hard conversations and just say, I'm not very good at talking about this. My parents never talked to me about this. But I think there's a lot of wisdom to share in some of the experiences I've had, some of the worries I've had. And I just want to open this conversation up with you. I think right now a lot of kids are in their rooms with their doors shut, and there's this real divide, and parents are even asking me, will you start working with my kid and then you can tell them things that I want to talk to them about? But really, that's an important conversation, an important bridge that we all need to make. And it's okay to give yourselves a break and just to do it whatever level you can, and to name it. Just say, this is a hard conversation to have, but let's start muddling along together. So the next category, compassion for self. This is a really important area to think about, because I feel like we really aren't going to see a peaceful shift in our world if we're not feeling a peacefulness within ourselves. And part of that starts with really forgiving yourself for your weaknesses, for your intense emotions, for your anger, for the things that feel not so great about you. Instead of feeling ashamed of the parts of yourself that aren't the best, we need to switch that into curiosity. By being curious with ourselves, we are sort of acknowledging that our emotions, even the dark ones, they're data. They tell us about our values. They tell us what we want, what we need. They guide us. A lot of people don't want to acknowledge the dark parts of themselves, but actually that is where a lot of information resides. So an example that I can share that happened recently was one of my clients who, she's in her 20s actually, she's probably about 27 now. She came to Minneapolis from another city. She got a really neat job here, came here, didn't know a soul. And actually I have a few people in their late 20s, and they have similar stories where they came to the Twin Cities, didn't know anyone, live alone in an apartment, and COVID hits and they are isolated here. They do not have connections with others that they know well, and maybe they're working on a screen. It's a tough time for people like that. So anyway, this particular client, she did get roommates. It was really important to her to live with people, to save money. So she found some roommates through like Craigslist or something, and she interviewed them, and she really set up a great community of women that she lives with. She's real happy about it. But then, a few months into this pandemic, she gets notice from her job that she is going to be laid off. So here she is up in a new city. She's starting to get connected and meet people, and then she loses her job. So when she came in to me, this week, she said, I feel almost hateful and jealous toward my roommates right now because they have jobs and they really like them. And I just feel, just all this negativity toward them. And she was sort of hunched over and very sad by just this negative feeling she had towards these people she cares about, but she also just covets basically what they have. So we really spent time looking at this negative emotion of jealousy, which we can all relate to that feeling. And really what jealousy was telling her is how much she cares about getting a good job and having a productive employed situation that shows her interest in her and something she can be proud of. She said, yeah, you're right. I really wouldn't feel that feeling of jealousy if someone had a great car or some other thing, but I do feel it about work. And so it really got us then shifting this conversation from a dark space of, what a cruel person I am that I feel this, to what does this mean about me and my values? This dark emotion gave us a lot of data about what she needs to do to start building on that and finding compassion for herself, that this feeling is really natural, but it's telling her a lot of information. So the other thing on compassion for self that I use a lot is, if people come in and they are having symptoms, so things like I can't sleep, I feel revved up and anxious, I have stomach aches, just physical symptoms that make us think maybe there's something more chronic going on here. What we do is this exercise where we back it up a few days. We kind of look at, how was your eating in the last 4 days? Did you get outside? Did you exercise? What was your alcohol use like in the last 4 days? What were your interactions like with people? Did you have any alterations with anyone that maybe seemed benign, but kind of weren't for you? They're kind of sitting with you. I would say almost 100% of the time, when people are starting to present with symptoms like that, we can back it up and see that they kind of slipped on some of the things they know are self-care and preserving. I always say, like, one of the best ways to manage anxiety is prevention, is to set yourselves up for feeling strong and good. So, with that, a lot of us don't always know exactly what we're doing. So I am a huge fan of journaling. I tell everyone I work with to at least make an attempt at journaling. And for many, it can be just even taking a cheap calendar and jotting each day some of the things that are important for you to get in a day. Went for a walk, called a friend, the things that serve you well. Maybe jot down if you had a lot of sweets on a certain day, or were out with your friends and maybe made some choices that weren't the best. And the reason we want to watch that is because we need to see patterns. We can't be in a position to really make changes if we're not watching the patterns. So, it doesn't have to be big, long writing that happens, but it can be just sort of a simple tool for helping us be more tuned into ourselves, so that when we have a rough patch or we feel low or heavy, we have this ability to look at the big picture, kind of see ourselves in the situation. The other thing that we can do sometimes in those days where we are feeling what I call kind of that activated place is just recognizing some days you need to have a bad day to have the perspective of a good day. So some days we just say, this is a hard day. What can I do to just take care of myself today? So it can be something like lighting a candle and just cozying up with your dog and a good book, or whatever it is that nurtures you. We all have the opportunity to basically parent ourselves, to give ourselves the loving care that we need in that day. And we don't need to overthink it. We just need to have this compassionate, warm way with ourselves. The last category, and the one that can be a little trickier, is compassion for others. We are all, as human beings, hardwired to connect. People in our life give us our why. When we do things with others in mind, we increase our sense of purpose in life. It's really the most vital protective factor for all mental health things is positive and healthy connection with others. But right now, I think what a lot of people are feeling is, hey, number one, we're told we shouldn't be seeing many people. And then the people that we are seeing, we're seeing on like overload to the max. So none of this feels like a complete healthy balance. And it can be really tricky. One of the things I like to say a lot to when I do couples work is we have to remember, and not even couples work, this is true for all relationships in our life. Nobody has the instruction manual on anybody else. We often don't even know our own instruction manual until our feelings tell us what it is we need. And this is why we need to be tuned into our experiences in situations. So what I can say about this specifically is that, when I am with my partner and we're having an interaction and I didn't like how it went, what's important for me is to tell him how I experienced it, rather than to make assumptions like, oh, he's this kind of person, he talked to me this way. We need to take time to back up and really hear and listen to what the other is saying. So this is where I language comes in. And, I'm assuming you guys have all heard the phrase I language. I love the reminder because we all get very clear on what the other person is doing wrong. You do this, you do that. It's really bothering me that you didn't put your clothes away, that you did this. So we have to kind of take a little pause and figure out a way to convey how we experience something that helps the other understand what was going on for us in that moment, so they can actually hear it and they're not on the defensive, right? So one example that actually I've been hearing a lot of versions of this lately is this was a situation where a woman I've seen for a long time, she's had a lot of challenges with her own mother. And she's a grown woman, has her own kids. She runs a big department in a amazing company downtown and has a team of young people working under her. But she feels like, with COVID, she's like, I don't want to bring this virus to my parents, my extended family. So they've really made a decision to kind of limit interaction there. They didn't exactly say that in clear terms, because the truth is, I think all of us, when this started, didn't know how long it was going to go on, and we haven't always articulated expectations around how our interactions would go. So she said, with her own mom, it's been easier. Her mom lives in another city, kind of out of the Twin Cities. So they've kind of inherently just haven't been around as much. But she said her in-laws, who mean a lot to her, live closer, and they used to have a very consistent role in her life and her kids' lives. But they've really hardly seen each other. So she said that they had a visit a while back, and she said she was kind of anxious during the visit because her mother-in-law kept kind of coming in the kitchen, and she just thought maybe she shouldn't, and she wasn't sure how to say it. So she kept kind of backing up, and she was wondering when she was going to go because the whole thing just felt worrisome. And I think her mother-in-law sort of sensed that she didn't really think she should be there. So she kind of left quickly, and they never spoke of it, just kind of ended abruptly. And then the next visit was supposed to be on Halloween because the grandparents wanted to come and see the kids in their costumes. And this client of mine, Amanda, said to them, maybe we should do a Zoom meeting instead. Maybe we should do something where, we don't have to worry about this. And then basically they set up a Zoom meeting, and the day got kind of out of control, as holidays do with little kids. The kids wanted to run with the neighbor friends. The day sort of went in different directions. And meanwhile, grandparents were super excited about this Zoom call. They even had some funny costumes that they were going to wear. They had some tricks that they were going to do at the Zoom call. And then Amanda said, we kind of blew it off. We sort of checked in, but we did it real quick and then we zoomed away. No pun intended. Well, after that, the grandparents felt crushed. They didn't want to even return calls. They were unable to really even speak to the pain and disappointment they were feeling. So when Amanda came in for her session, she's like, I've really screwed up. I don't know what to do in this situation. I feel terrible, but they won't even talk to me. And this is a case of the instruction manual doesn't really need words. I think in their actions, ultimately the perfect thing would be if grandparents would have said, you know, we need some time. We feel like we're just not getting what we need. I know you're trying to be safe, but can we get creative about how this is going to look? But I think they're so beyond sort of that point. They're so sad that they aren't feeling comfortable to really speak up for what they need. So, you know, with Amanda, I kind of said, let's just imagine what they would say if they gave you the instructions. And she said, I just know that that's exactly what it is. I need to be more conscientious about time with them. And frankly, you know, her husband, it's his parents. So, you know, he too could be part of this communication, and he is, but she just happens to be the one who's coming in to talk to me about it. So in this scenario, we were able to create the instructions and think about compassion for the other side. Now, the grandparents maybe aren't recognizing how many things she has on her plate. You know, she's trying to homeschool, she's trying to run a team, you know, via her laptop. She has a lot going on as well. And I think it's just, this is where if we all take time to really try to have compassion for how other people's experiences, but it's dangerous territory to make assumptions about what other people are feeling and experiencing. We need to take time to ask. It takes bravery. And again, back to the mind thing, it's okay if those conversations feel awkward. We've got to allow ourselves uncomfortableness. It's part of life. It's okay to even say, this is a hard thing to talk about. My voice is even shaking, or this is a conflict. I don't feel great about it, but I'm gonna, you know, just delve into it anyway, because I'd rather show up for you in an honest way than not at all. So, you know, I think with thinking about others and compassion for others, this is hard work to do. And if you find yourself with a lot of blocks, I think it's where we need to go back to the compassion for self. What is getting in the way of your ability to show up in a peaceful way and an honest way and in a vulnerable way with the people that you care about? Because normally it does begin with that connection with ourselves. And it might be that we somewhere along the line had some rough experiences when we had those hard conversations with someone. So we carry that little cloak of a negative time to all of our future experiences. And we need to give ourselves an opportunity to work that through and understand that. And that's a lot of what we do in the therapy space, is we help ourselves sort of know where our blocks are and how we can, you know, bravely kind of work through those. So I didn't put a timer on, so I don't know if I'm over with my time, but I just wanted to say too that, you know, this is a hard year. There are no right answers. We can do hard things. These are times where there is so much grief, and that sweet little video, it almost made me cry, because it is just a perfect little snippet of versions of what we're all experiencing. Incredible losses and limitations have come this year, but there's also been these new little beginnings and openings, you know, with every end is a beginning. And someday too, the things that we have let go are going to come back. So I hope that we can all, in a spirit of great appreciation, you know, start the next step that we have after we get this vaccine, which is on the horizon. It's wonderful. And just remember, sometimes we do feel a little nutty. It's part of it. that sometimes we feel like a nut and sometimes we don't, I think is something we can all appreciate, and we can give ourselves some grace over the fact that as human beings, we do have the range. Thank you so much for having me today.
Anybody have a question to start us off this morning?
I'm gonna leave.
Okay, bye, Jim. Any questions for us this morning?
Just so appreciate you speaking to all the different family dynamics as we're each dealing with family dynamics and how it relates to COVID, not wanting to ruffle feathers, but also finding a balance between safety and seeing people. So thank you for speaking to that. Very helpful.
Thanks, Danielle.
I agree with Danielle, and I just understanding what our younger folks are going through as grandparents, just understanding what is happening in other people's lives is so very important, and asking them if you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think any tips we can get for, how to talk to family and with both the political, the pandemic and the politics, right? And the divisions that have been felt in those, whether it's siblings or, and I took a lot of calls this week, it feels like, from 30-something-year-old nieces and nephews who, are frustrated with how their parents are behaving in the pandemic, or with split politics, or it's really hard stuff. It's just really hard stuff. I think really recognizing our fears, that we all have all these fears in the midst of this, and the reactiveness to that. So anyway, I just appreciate any input that way.
Yeah, Kay, I love that you brought that up. I was kind of trying to give kind of a lot of information in a short time. I honestly could speak for days on some of these topics, but this has been, there's some hot off the press research that was saying more than ever, people are feeling like this election is tied to their values. It doesn't feel like Republican, Democrat. It felt like if you're choosing one side or the other, you are identifying with a lot of values that it's hard to separate out. So what the research showed was that young people in their 20s or whatever won't even actually date someone often if they were of a different political party, because it represented so much more than just, a conservative value base or kind of leaning one way or the other. I mean, in many homes, I think we've for years just canceled each other out. And it didn't become this source of incredible anger and disappointment and frustration. And somehow this year it took on kind of a life of its own, that none of us are really prepared to know how to talk about these things. But I think this is a really good space to try to enter those conversations with trying to understand the other versus trying to tell or convince the other where you're at. Because the truth is, it is often just a few issues that people feel super passionate about. And so when you really start to say, tell me why, your vote is here. What are the issues around that particular candidate that put you, to vote that direction? And we can really get essentially at some fears that are there, trying to understand what shaped this position for them. And then it doesn't feel as much like, this job for us to transfer them over to our way of thinking. It's like, okay, I understand this is about something that speaks to more of a fear for you, or kind of an ideology that you're having a hard time seeing differently. I think, there is really not a great way to talk about politics that leaves everyone feeling great, but at least if you go in with the spirit of, I just want to try and understand them and no agenda to make change. Because, over the last several weeks, the ones who came to me just with like, I'm not speaking to my parents anymore, things like that. It was always from a space of, I've made a call to them and I was on a mission to get them to change their vote. Well, you can imagine that conversation doesn't go well, and everyone leaves very misunderstood and angry. And I think it's just, again, entering in that spirit of trying to understand. And I don't know if anyone out there has had some positive experiences being able to talk to people who have different opinions on it. I have to admit, in this area, with some friends of mine or people that I care about in my life who I know differed from me, I kind of chose just not to talk about it, because it just felt like I wanted to focus on the things I like about them and enjoy about them. And I recognized in myself, I was incredibly activated about this. So I couldn't neutralize myself to listen well. So I knew I wasn't really available to try and understand. So that was like me recognizing my shortcoming. I just was like, I don't know if I can like you right now. That was like a tantruming kind of way I felt about it. So I'd love to hear if others have, some experiences that were positive for them.
I do have a question that's kind of along these same lines. I think, this year with the uprising in Minneapolis and just all of these things, we hear a lot about this concept of a social contract. When you're talking about speaking openly and honestly and being vulnerable, all I could think of was John Mulaney and one of his bits where he talks about how like Mick Jagger just says like Coke now and one appears, and like the rest of us non-superstars have to like, anytime we walk into an office, we have to like duck our heads and say knock knock, and that we have his words, or we have this ridiculous way of talking to each other. But I feel like there is this social contract that it's like this weird game that we have to play of like how we talk to each other, and being open and honest and vulnerable often is not allowed in that social contract. And so I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on how do we kind of overcome this social contract that really doesn't allow for honesty. It doesn't allow for us to be vulnerable. How do we overcome it without just being mean and angry or coming off that way, right? Like, just kind of curious if you have any thoughts about that.
So I just want to understand what your question is are you saying like, because we're trying to be honest and vulnerable, just inherent in our honesty and our vulnerability, we might come off angry or opinionated? Is that sort of what you mean by that, Brian?
Yeah, I think so. It's how do we just kind of overcome this this notion that like, anytime someone says, how you doing? It's just, we have to say, oh, we're fine. And that's it, and move on. How do we kind of overcome this without like being aggressive or being oversharey or being, whatever all of those negative things are? How do we kind of overcome that?
Yeah. Wow. What a great question. This is where I do like to just name things. So there's two things that are coming to mind. And if anyone else wants to weigh in on this, but one is when we know we are not what I call on solid footing with something, meaning we're real activated on that topic, I probably wouldn't talk to the masses about it, because I realize I'm more in an emotional space than a rational space. So this is the information. These are the topics I reserve for the people that I can show all the ugliness and truth of who I am and sort it out, so I can access a little more of the rational part of myself. So we know what those topics are, and I think that's what I'm trying to say. Even with politics, I knew I wasn't my most rational self, so I knew that it wasn't great to maybe talk to the masses about. But I could name it. I could say, I'm just probably not the best person to talk with you about this right now, because I do feel kind of like I sense I get kind of, just revved up and passionate, and it might come off in a way that doesn't seem easy to receive. So to answer your question, I would say, like, I love it because, yeah, we there's sort of these rules of society. We don't want to dump on other people. We don't want to seem like a bull in a china cabinet, but we also want to feel truthful and honest. And we need to show up with some passion and some agency around, like, I want to see some change, and this needs to be said. So I always say, like, start with your favorite 5, those people in your world that they can hear you say it unedited and raw, and you can kind of sort it out a little and get yourself more organized before you go to kind of the next tier and an outside group. Yeah. And maybe don't talk about it, while you're cocktailing or something, right? Yes. Was that helpful? I don't know if that answered your question.
I liked it. I thought it was a good answer. Thank you. Others that have questions this morning?
How do I encourage my 10-year-old who's just figured out that we're going to go fully remote, who tends to be a little bit more introverted, to kind of share his vulnerabilities and shame, and any advice on that?
Yes.
Since you know him too, you might be able to help with that.
So this is my sister, Megan. Hello, welcome. Joining us from Chicago. So she has 2 younger boys, elementary school, and I'm sure a lot of you know kids right now that just received the news. It almost like puts a lump in my throat. These children have just learned that school is going fully online. And there's a few schools out there that are still able to be hybrid or stay in service, littler private schools or whatever. But for the most part, most kids are going fully online now, if they weren't already. And this is so hard for these kids because it's like they're swimming so deep in the losses that they are experiencing this year that there really isn't a lot of verbal capacity to even put words to it. It's almost like we're going to be dealing with sort of the shock of all of this down the road because it's so big. So, I feel like, Meg, and to anyone else who's talking to kids, we just need to let them know, like, it's okay to have a sad day. And this is a really lonely collective time that we're all facing together. I think it's one of those things where, too, even just showing my nephew Liam, like, this video was so sweet. That, who's that darling young fella with the treehouse?
That's Ted.
And then the young boy right at the beginning, like, I mean, they're speaking to the masses, those sweethearts. I mean, it's, just hearing other people say, it's really hard that I'm not able to see my friends, but I am able to see my dad a little more, and I'm able to be with my dog, and that's great. But it doesn't take away from the fact that I really thrive on being in the classroom, being with the teacher, being with people. And I keep saying it's hard to think of our life in terms of the whole thing, and this is just a slice that's really, really hard. But sometimes that perspective is helpful for kids. It's hard right now, but we're gonna get to the finish line. Maybe doing some fun things to, create that finish line. Now that we do have some medical, shifts happening, and maybe there is some hopefulness around the bend, and it's just like, okay, what are we gonna do to have some little positives along the way? Yeah.
I'd like to respond a little bit to what, in an affirmation to what you've said to Deacon Brian, and about saying, how are you? Oh, just fine, responding that way. And Chuck Swindoll a while ago responded to being honest. We're all liars when somebody says, well, how are you? Oh, I'm fine. And if we can get a little more honesty with that, say, the bacon burned this morning and I don't feel very good about that, or to be able to say, I'm I'm not so fine, to be honest. And honesty with our spouses and with anybody we talk to could start with, I'm not so fine.
Yes.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah, I love that. I think, that's sort of what I was saying about I don't feel like our stories are only our own. I think our stories are meant for our collective humanity. And that's sort of what I mean around that is if we all just put this Teflon shield and act like everything's okay, and we don't share some of the journeys that we're all on, and we don't offer up the wisdom of some of our painful times, we're really cutting off, and we're actually setting people up for reinventing the wheel over and over and over again. It's like you can say, I burned the bacon this morning. It was such a bummer. I'm struggling. But you know what I learned? If I do this, I'm not going to burn the bacon again. And you know what? Just by telling people, you prevent them from burning the bacon. So, that's just like a very classic example of like, if we could just share our heartache sometimes, we can help others prevent that heartache from happening, or just get some tools in their tool bag that, that they, just feel less alone in some of those disappointments.
I think too, by admitting you burn the bacon, they're more willing to admit they burn the bacon too. But so I think it also allows us to get deeper in our relationships, right? When we say, oh, I'm having a day, here's where I am. And they say, you know what, I actually am too. And then it allows for more of a connection than I'm fine, you're fine, the bacon's great.
I just want to weigh in on behalf of burned bacon, which is delicious. So if you burned it, I'll take it this morning. I mean, if you've got burned bacon, I'm on my way, Virgil. It's good stuff.
Yes.
Whatever they do in Canada is a bad idea. So any other questions or reflections for us this morning?
It's not an original thought with me. My second cousin, who's an educator, realized that he had burnt the bacon and had a bad day, and how he responded to his kids. So they use that as a phrase. Oh, the bacon burned this morning. Something went wrong, and they were able to then talk about it or get beyond whatever was bothering them.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Sorry. I was just going to add that that's exactly right. Sometimes if we don't identify the thing that's bothering us, it comes out sideways. So this bothered us, but we don't acknowledge it. And then all of a sudden we're throwing a fit at the person at the grocery store for bagging our things wrong, or we just feel the grumpiness settling in, and it doesn't have a way to get out. So it comes out sideways. I always say, like, if you're noticing yourself having reactivity places, it just seems like it doesn't belong. It's probably because you're not responding to it in a way that lets it out in a healthy, productive manner.
Yeah, I find with our kids, when our kids call with a problem, I have 20-year-olds. I immediately go to, I want to fix this. How can I help you fix this? But my husband wisely, I just hear him use all these words of empathy. I hear you. I'm sorry that happened. I hear that you feel bad. I feel bad for you too, which gives them so much more than me spinning in my spot trying to think about fixing it, even if I could fix it, because they need the self-esteem work of them fixing it for themselves, and his empathy helps them get themselves there. So
yes,
I think that's really helpful too.
Hey, I heard a saying this week. I have to tell you, it has been amazing. Every mom in the room can relate to this. Helping is the sunny side of control, right? We want to help our kids because we want to control the situation. We do not want that. And I shouldn't say just mothers, fathers too, but I think we mothers, just as the Darlene person who was saying men don't take good care of themselves. Well, so we're generalizing a bit. There are men who do. And of course, there's women who are not fixers and helpers. But as a general rule, we as mothers, from the very beginning, it's, we need to make sure they're comfortable and get their needs met, and we water them and we feed them and we, enrich them. And then it's really hard when the day comes that they need to kind of start stepping out and doing those things for themselves. And we want to still maintain control over those areas. We want to tell them how to eat, what to do, how to enrich, how to all the things. And so it's that is where we have to remind ourselves that all that helping is really just a need for control. And then it's a chance to really dig into ourselves and say, okay, how can I shift that and believe, as you said, Kay, that their mistakes and muddling along is actually the best thing for them right now when they're 20.
Morning. Good
Nancy,
morning.
I heard you wanted to jump in there too. Thanks.
Good morning. I would just add that the emotion that I have been feeling lately, and Kay suggested that we write these down, is distracted. There have been so many layers of emotions since the beginning of this year. And I'm feeling all over the place. I can move from one thing to the other in a matter of seconds, or my brain is moving that direction. I'm finding it hard to stay present sometimes with what's going on. That's how it's impacted me.
Yes. Oh, thank you for saying that. I think that is, I'm nodding. I can really appreciate that. I think distraction is one of those things I was saying, like when we show up with symptoms, a symptom of feeling, because that's the number one thing I hear: difficulty concentrating, sleep issues, it's showing up in these spaces that we haven't had before. And this is why it's okay to give yourself permission to slow things down a little. And just saying it sometimes also is helpful, just validating, wow, I think this is a time where it is going to be hard for me to attend to tasks in the way I used to, and give myself permission to not do the job in the way I used to do it, whatever it is, or, to move from thing to thing. I also think if there's a way, and I don't know, how you're constructing your time, but just to give yourself quiet where there are no other distractions for you. There's no TV on, there's no anything, and just really try and calm yourself in that moment. Do some real nurturing things. There's a little, it's kind of a meditation that is called the senses of the five senses meditation. And I love this because it's very grounding. It helps us ground that sort of like revved up, I can't focus, I feel distracted. So you think in terms of, sight, hearing, touch, smell. You go through your senses and you close your eyes and you take some deep breaths and you try and notice something with each of those senses. Or you can even put things around you that would get you focused on those senses. And what that does is just brings you into the present moment, because part of what's causing that distractibility is just all this, it's sort of that monkey brain starts going. It's just, there's so many things happening right now and so many unknowns that it really activates that fight or flight kind of feeling we have, right? So I don't know if you've ever tried any kind of quiet meditation in your day, and if that's helped you feel calmer.
I listen to my sewing machine.
Yes. That's a sound. So I would encourage.
That's my comfort. My happy place is sewing. Yeah.
Nice creative outlet. When you're sewing, do you feel more focused and able to concentrate in that?
Yep.
Yes. And that is that whole thing, what we were talking about with the mind, where we, if we are doing, we can get out of that mind that is spinning and activated, right? So doing is a sense of agency. It directs us to something productive, and we feel definitely calmed in that.
It works for me. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everybody. I just want to be aware of time. How about a round of applause and thanks for Kirsten this morning. Thank you so very much for being with us. We are grateful and appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I need to go because my mom is cooking me bacon this morning, and there she is up there, and it will be well cooked, well done bacon for sure.
One quick thank you to Jody who connected us to Kirsten. That was Jody's resources are super helpful to me and us. So
I'm-
thanks.
I'm just very blessed to work with a lot of wonderful colleagues that keep, and we support each other a lot right now. And I just want to thank you all for allowing that we get to do this at Shepherd of the Hills, and everybody's willing to do it. And I thank you for your prayers, because Kirsten, I do need them. It's tough right now. It's tough for all of us. And we'll make it through this, as Kirsten said, we will. So.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, everybody. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.